Have you ever felt like your body was trying to whisper something to you, but you weren't quite sure what it was saying? For many women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, there's a quiet unease that sometimes follows us. A little fatigue that feels heavier than usual. A strange sensation in the lower belly that we dismiss as just aging. A bit of spotting we brush off because, after all, we've already gone through menopause. And yet deep inside, there's often a nudge, a whisper, a question we don't want to ask. Could this be something more? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And you're not imagining things. Today, we're talking about something that too often stays in the shadows. Cancer of the womb, also known as uterine cancer. And more specifically, the subtle, sometimes silent, signs that your body might be trying to share. Now, before you turn away or feel overwhelmed, I want to tell you this. This isn't a video about fear. This is a video about power. The kind of power that comes from awareness, from listening to yourself, and from knowing what's normal for you. Because the truth is, many women don't recognize the early signs of uterine cancer. Not because they aren't paying attention, but because no one ever told them what to look for. So let's begin, not with statistics or scary stories, but with a shift in mindset. Let's talk about why paying attention to your body isn't worry, it's wisdom. There's a harmful myth that often follows women as we age, especially after menopause. It sounds like this: it's normal to feel tired. That bloating is just your diet. Some spotting is probably just dryness. You're getting older. What do you expect? These phrases sound harmless, but they can be dangerous. Because when we normalize discomfort without investigation, we miss the chance to catch something early, when it's most treatable. Let me tell you about Marianne. Marianne is 68. She's the kind of woman who keeps her garden blooming and always has tea ready when a friend drops by. A few years ago, she started noticing some changes. A light pink stain after walking the dog. A dull ache in her lower belly that came and went. Some days she felt too tired to get through the afternoon. She didn't think much of it. Must be my age, she told herself. I'm not as spry as I used to be. But one day, at her regular wellness checkup, she mentioned it, just casually, almost as a joke. And her doctor paused. A few tests later, Marianne had a diagnosis she never expected. Early-stage cancer in the lining of her womb. It was caught early because she spoke up, because she didn't ignore what her body had been trying to say. She told me, "It wasn't fear that saved me. It was curiosity. I wanted to know why my body was acting different. I wanted to listen." That right there is the shift we're here to make. Let's stop brushing things off. Let's stop telling ourselves we're just getting old. Let's start asking the question, is this new for me? Because aging doesn't mean everything becomes a mystery. It means we learn to pay attention differently, more gently, more thoroughly, more wisely. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and stay with me until the end. You might hear something that gives you peace, clarity, or even the courage to make a call you've been putting off. Let's also be honest. Talking about our reproductive health after menopause often feels off limits, as if that part of our body is done, silent, retired. But it's not. Your womb, even after its reproductive role has ended, is still part of you. It still deserves care, awareness, and attention. There's nothing shameful or awkward about that. In fact, it's deeply empowering, because cancer doesn't care if we're done having periods. It doesn't care if we've raised children, lived decades, or quietly tucked away our feminine concerns. What it does care about is time. And time, when it comes to detection, is everything. That's why knowing the early signs matters. Not because we should live in fear, but because we should live in clarity. And let's be very clear, most of the time, the signs don't scream. They whisper. They show up in small ways. A bit of spotting after years without. A bloated belly that doesn't go away. An unusual discharge, discomfort during intimacy. A tiredness that feels heavier than usual. Individually, these things can have many causes, but collectively, they deserve attention. They deserve follow-up. They deserve to be taken seriously, especially by you. Because here's a truth I want you to carry into the rest of this video. You know your body better than anyone else. You are allowed to question. You are allowed to speak up. You are allowed to be heard. So many women delay because they don't want to be a bother, because they worry their doctor will dismiss them, because they're afraid of what they might find out. But the only thing more frightening than asking the question is never asking it at all. And this is not about panic. It's about power. It's about standing in front of the mirror and saying, I matter enough to check. It's about listening to your gut, not with dread, but with dignity. It's about choosing to live the rest of your life with as much presence, energy, and health as possible. And that choice begins with awareness. So as we move into the next part of this video, I want you to hold on to this. Your body isn't turning against you. It's communicating with you. And when you learn the language, when you know the signs, you move from fear to focus, from silence to strength. Let's take that next step together. Let's slow down for a moment, not to be afraid, but to make space for clarity. Because the most powerful decisions are made not in panic, but in peace. And when it comes to understanding the signs of cancer in the womb, peace begins with gentle preparation. We're not preparing for a worst-case scenario. We're preparing to be informed, to be ahead of the curve, to be our own best advocate. And that begins with one question. What does not normal mean for you? You see, the hardest part about recognizing early signs of uterine cancer is that the symptoms can look like other things. Things we've learned to ignore, things we've normalized over the years. So let's gently, compassionately name the common signals your body might send. Not to scare you, but to give you a voice for what you may have felt but didn't know how to describe. Let's begin with one of the most overlooked signs, postmenopausal spotting. If you've gone through menopause, then your body has said goodbye to monthly periods. So any bleeding, whether it's a full flow or just a pink tinge on the tissue, deserves attention. Don't let anyone tell you it's probably just dryness or just part of aging. It may very well be benign, but it may also be your body trying to wave a small flag that says, please look into this. Marcia, a 71-year-old piano teacher, told me something that broke my heart. She said, I saw some light spotting one morning and thought, well, I guess my body's just being strange again. I didn't mention it for months, until I couldn't ignore the bloating that came with it. Her diagnosis came later than it should have. And what hurt her most wasn't the diagnosis. It was knowing she knew something was off, but talked herself out of caring. You don't have to be that silent with yourself. Because here's the truth. Bleeding after menopause is not normal, ever. Whether it's light, brown, pink, or red. Whether it happens once or more than once. Whether it's with cramps or completely painless. It's not something to monitor casually. It's something to investigate. The second sign, persistent lower belly bloating or pain. This one is tricky because as women, we often chalk this up to digestive issues. Too much fiber, not enough fiber, gas, hormonal changes, just one of those days. But if you feel a kind of fullness that doesn't go away, if your waistband starts to feel tight even though your weight hasn't changed, if there's a dull ache low in your pelvis that lingers or returns, listen to that. Pain doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it hides beneath habits. We sit with it, we tolerate it, we push through it, but your body shouldn't feel like a burden. And discomfort, especially new or unfamiliar discomfort, is worth exploring. Now let's talk about another area we often avoid, unusual discharge. Yes, it's uncomfortable to mention, but this matters. If you experience a watery pink or foul-smelling discharge that you haven't had before, especially after menopause, that is your cue to check in with your doctor. It doesn't mean you're dirty. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It means your body has changed, and it's trying to communicate. The fourth sign is often hidden behind emotional silence, discomfort during intimacy. This is a tender topic, and many women, especially after 60, no longer talk openly about their romantic lives. Some feel ashamed. Some feel dismissed. Some feel they no longer have permission to talk about those parts of themselves. But intimacy is part of being human, regardless of age. If you feel discomfort, pain, or unusual pressure during moments of closeness, please don't brush it aside. Changes in the uterus can affect neighboring tissues, and while these symptoms don't always indicate something serious, they are part of the body's larger story. You deserve to feel safe and respected in every part of your life, including in love. And the fifth sign, the one that almost always gets ignored: fatigue. Not just tired from a long day, but a kind of tired that's heavy, persistent, unshakable, a tired that makes it harder to get out of bed, a tired that lingers no matter how much you rest, a tired that feels different than the tired you've known before. Sometimes that fatigue is your body signaling an internal imbalance, and sometimes it's related to how your blood is functioning. Uterine cancer, like many cancers, can affect the way oxygen is carried in your body. It can create subtle metabolic changes, and it can drain your energy long before you feel pain. So if your tired feels unfamiliar, if it feels like something deeper, trust that. Explore it, because you know your body better than anyone. Now let's look at what it really means to get ready. Not perfectly, but honestly. Getting ready means making a list of what's changed. Getting ready means calling your doctor, even when it feels awkward. Getting ready means choosing peace of mind over silent worry. And getting ready, most of all, means believing that your health is worth protecting. Not just for the people who love you, but for you. Let me share a line from Julia, a retired librarian who caught her cancer early. She said, "The moment I took my symptoms seriously was the moment I realized I'm not done taking care of myself." That line stuck with me because it reminds us that we are always allowed to return to ourselves, to listen, to honor, to check in, not just when something goes wrong, but when something feels different. So if you're hearing this and thinking, maybe I've noticed something, that's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to ask, to clarify, to care, because the sooner you notice, the sooner you know. And the sooner you know, the sooner you can act from power, not from fear. Most people never hear this part, but it could change how you move forward forever. Let's walk into that next step together. By now, we've moved through awareness and reflection. You've heard the quiet signs. You've considered your own story. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to act. But how do you take that next step without fear? How do you move from concern to clarity, from confusion to calm? Here's where things become real, because this is what it looks like to live the change, not just think about it. And it starts with the simplest act: picking up the phone, calling your doctor, not to say, "I'm afraid something's wrong," but to say, "I've noticed some changes, and I'd like to understand them better." That shift in language matters. You're not making a dramatic claim. You're making an informed choice. You're stepping into the role of partner, not patient, advocate, not bystander. Take Elizabeth, for instance. She was 66 as when she first noticed something off. Spotting after walking her dog, a little pressure in her belly. But she wasn't sure if it was worth mentioning. "I don't want to be dramatic," she told me. But after watching a video, one like this, she decided to call. Her doctor scheduled a transvaginal ultrasound. Nothing painful, just a look. And what they found wasn't yet cancer, but it was something. A polyp in the uterine lining. Harmless for now, but with the potential to turn dangerous over time. They removed it, monitored her, followed up. And now, 3 years later, she says, "I sleep peacefully, not because I'm invincible, but because I listened in time." That's the power of early attention. So what does this process look like? Let me walk you through it, step by step. If you notice unusual spotting, persistent bloating, new discharge, intimacy discomfort, or unexplained fatigue, the first thing to do is write it down. Yes, actually write it down. Dates, symptoms, anything you felt that feels different. This helps you see patterns. It helps your doctor understand your concern. And most importantly, it reminds you that your experience is valid. Next, schedule an appointment. Not just any appointment, but one where you clearly state, I'd like to discuss some postmenopausal symptoms I've been experiencing that signals to your provider that this is not a routine check-in. If your doctor listens attentively and takes you seriously, wonderful. If they dismiss you, brush you off, or minimize your concerns, that is not a reflection of your worth. That is a signal to find another provider who does respect you, because you deserve a listener, a partner, a professional who sees your age as a badge of wisdom, not a reason for indifference. Most evaluations for uterine changes are straightforward. They may include a pelvic exam to check for abnormalities, a transvaginal ultrasound to look at the thickness of the uterine lining, if needed, an endometrial biopsy, a quick sample from the lining, often done in the office. In some cases, a hysteroscopy, where a tiny camera looks inside the womb for clarity. Do these sound intimidating? Maybe a little, but they're brief, they're manageable, and they're often life-saving. The good news, most uterine cancers are found in the earliest stages, when women speak up, when they act from knowledge, not from crisis. Let me tell you about two sisters, Carol and Dee. Carol had spotting. Dee didn't, but Carol ignored it. Dee didn't. Dee got checked. She had a benign growth, removed easily. Carol waited. 6 months passed. The spotting came back, heavier. When she finally got checked, it was cancer. Treatable, but harder, more invasive, more fearful. Both women were brave, but Dee taught me something I'll never forget. She said, "There's a kind of strength in acting before you're certain. It's not fear, it's love for yourself." And that's the heart of this part of our journey. Acting with heart. Choosing to love yourself enough to ask the questions, to follow through, to show up for yourself, just like you've shown up for others all your life. Because maybe no one ever told you this before, but you are worth that level of care. And while we're talking about action, let's not forget one of the most powerful actions you can take, sharing what you've learned, not just with doctors, but with friends, sisters, daughters, granddaughters, neighbors. You don't have to be a health expert to be a voice of awareness. You can say, "I watched a video that made me think differently about this." You can say, "I had a symptom and I'm getting it checked out, just in case." You can say, "We're not too old to pay attention. We're wise enough now to know how." Every time you speak up, you give someone else permission to do the same. You create ripples, safe spaces, conversations that may save lives. So let me ask you now, what's one step you can take today? A call, a note, a calendar reminder, a conversation over lunch. Don't wait for certainty. Don't wait for permission. What comes next might be the most healing truth of all, that your voice, your awareness, your courage may become the light that guides someone else home to themselves. So act. Act with information. Act with confidence. Act with heart. Because there's a version of you in the mirror who has carried so much. She deserves to feel heard. She deserves to feel safe. She deserves to feel powerful. And she doesn't need to be perfect. She just needs to wobble one step. So now that we've come this far, let's go even deeper. Because what we do next isn't just about our bodies. It's about our identity. It's about how we see ourselves after 60, after diagnosis, after everything, and what it means to carry dignity into every chapter that remains. Let's step into that reflection together. There's something quiet that happens after a health scare, or even just the thought of one. You start looking at things differently, not just your body, but your memories, your routine, your reflection in the mirror. You may ask questions you haven't voiced in years. Who am I now? Am I still whole? Am I still beautiful? Am I still me? Because when your body changes, when it feels foreign or fragile, it's easy to feel like your identity is slipping through your fingers. But here's what I want you to hear, perhaps more than anything else in this video. You are not the sum of your symptoms. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your uterus. You are not your fatigue or your pain or your past. You are a woman still becoming, still unfolding, still worthy of softness, strength, and reverence. Now we're not just moving, we're transforming the way we see ourselves in this season of life. Let's talk about the emotional layer of this journey. because it's one that almost no one discusses, but many women silently carry. The fear isn't just about illness, it's about what illness represents: loss of control, loss of intimacy, loss of femininity, loss of worth, especially when it comes to health issues that affect the womb, a place that once symbolized vitality, creation, and womanhood. It's deeply personal, and for many, deeply sacred. So when that part of us feels under threat, we can feel erased. But you are not erased, you are evolving. Let me introduce you to someone whose words changed how I think about this entirely. Her name is Anita. She was 72 when she underwent a hysterectomy after early-stage uterine cancer was found. The surgery saved her life, but afterwards she felt something else, a quiet grief. "I didn't expect to mourn that part of me," she said. "It felt like saying goodbye to the girl I once was." But then something beautiful happened. A few months into recovery, she started writing letters to herself, not just to the woman she was now, but to the girl she used to be, the mother she once was, the lover, the friend, the wild spirit in her 20s, the strong one in her 40s. She honored them all, and slowly, her grief turned to gratitude. She told me, "I realized I hadn't lost anything that made me me. I was simply stepping into the version of myself who no longer needed to carry it all in her body, because it now lived in my memory, in my love, in my wisdom." That shift, from fear to reverence, is what this part is about. You have every right to feel shaken by change, but you also have every right to reclaim the meaning of that change. Because aging doesn't take away your beauty, it reveals a different kind. A kind that isn't tied to physical perfection, but to emotional presence. A kind that isn't measured by what your body can do, but by how fully you inhabit it, scars and all. One woman told me something so tender, I wrote it down the moment she said it. "I stopped measuring my worth by what I could produce. I started measuring it by how deeply I could feel, and how honestly I could live." There's no test for that kind of wellness, but it may be the most powerful wellness of all. So let's reframe the journey together. Let's stop talking about health as only prevention and survival, and start talking about it as transformation. Let's see medical appointments not as interruptions, but as affirmations. I care enough to check. I respect myself enough to ask. I want to be here, fully here, for the next chapter. And let's shift how we think about vulnerability. Because in this culture, vulnerability often gets mistaken for weakness. But in reality, it is the bravest way to be human. To say, I'm not invincible, but I'm open, I'm learning, I'm healing. That is strength, that is wisdom, and that is what your body, in all its imperfections, is still offering you. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you placed a hand on your lower belly? Not to judge it, not to scold it, but to thank it. To say, you've held so much, you've endured so much, and I see you, I thank you. That kind of connection isn't sentimental, it's sacred. And whether you've had children or not, whether you've had surgery or not, whether you're in treatment or thriving or simply curious, you are allowed to love this part of yourself again, because your womb is not just an organ. It's a part of your story. And even when that chapter changes, the story still continues, with more wisdom, more depth, more courage than ever before. You are still whole. You are still here. And if no one said this to you in a while, let me be the one to say it. You are not broken. You are breaking through. So as we move into the final part of this video, an affirmation, a reflection, and an invitation, I want you to carry this. Your story isn't over because something changed. It's expanding, and the most beautiful pages may still be unwritten. Let's write them together. So here we are, at the end of a conversation, but perhaps the beginning of something even more important. If you've stayed with me this far, I want to pause for a moment and honor that. Because this wasn't just a video about uterine cancer. This was a conversation about listening to your body, to your story, and to the quiet strength that's always lived inside you. And if there's one thing I want you to carry with you when you walk away today, it's this: you matter, you are still becoming, and your health is not a burden, it is a birthright. Maybe you came here out of curiosity. Maybe you saw the word cancer and felt your stomach tighten. Maybe someone you love is going through this and you wanted to understand more. Or maybe you've been quietly wondering about a symptom, a discomfort, a change you've tried to ignore. Wherever you are in that story, I want you to know you are not alone. The journey through aging, health, and womanhood is not one straight road. It's a winding path, full of questions, pauses, and sometimes second chances. And uterine cancer, it's not the whole story, but for too many women, it becomes part of the story because no one told them how to listen sooner. Now you know. Now you have words for what you felt. Now you understand what signs to notice, what questions to ask, and what actions to take. And that knowledge, it's more than information. It's empowerment. But knowledge alone isn't enough. It needs to be held with care, with compassion, with courage. Because even after all this, you might still hesitate. You might think, I'll wait a little longer. I don't want to bother anyone. I'm probably just imagining it. But let me ask you gently, if your daughter told you the same things, what would you say? If your best friend called you with these symptoms, would you tell her to wait? Of course not. You would say, go, ask, check, you're worth it. So now I'm saying that to you. Go, ask, check, you are worth it. Not just because early detection saves lives, but because you deserve peace of mind. You deserve clarity. You deserve to feel like the expert of your own body. And here's something else you may not hear often. Whatever happens next, you are strong enough to face it. If everything checks out normal, wonderful. Celebrate that. If something needs follow-up, you'll handle it with grace, with guidance, with support. There is no shame in needing care. There is only wisdom in receiving it. I want to leave you with a story. Her name was Sandra. She was 75 when she told me this. For years, I ignored the signs because I thought they meant something was wrong with me. But now I realize they meant something was right with me. My body was still trying to protect me, still trying to speak. Isn't that beautiful? Even when we feel our bodies are betraying us, they're often still working to help us heal, still communicating, still on our side. So maybe it's time to rebuild that trust. Maybe it's time to place a hand on your heart, or your belly, or your hip, or wherever you feel the most tenderness, and say, thank you for carrying me this far. I promise to listen more closely from now on. That's how healing begins. Not always with medicine, not always with surgery. Sometimes it begins with reverence. So here's what I hope for you truly. That you leave this video not with fear, but with focus, not with anxiety, but with awareness, not with heaviness, but with hope. Hope that your next chapter will be written with intention. Hope that you will speak up for yourself with kindness. Hope that you will see yourself not as someone fading, but as someone deepening. You've lived through so much, loved so deeply, lost and loved and kept going. You do not need to prove your worth with toughness or silence. You prove your worth by being here, still curious, still becoming. So if this video brought up anything for you, any question, any memory, any emotion, I want to invite you to do something small and meaningful today. Write it down. Talk to someone. Call your doctor. Share this video with a friend. Don't let this moment pass by like another bit of information in the wind. Let it root. Let it grow into action. Because you never know, your story, your voice, your courage might be the very thing that saves someone else. And that, my friend, is the legacy of awareness. So if you're ready, come walk this next part of life with us. Here, we speak truth, we share care, we age with grace, we act with intention. And if you ever feel like you're alone in this, know that we're here every week, every video, every message for you, because we see you, we believe in you, and we know you are still becoming.